In truth, this question comes from the Blue White Illustrated message board as well, but I want to fold in some of the things that Nate just said into this, something that came from the Friday chat that we do each week. Just getting people get to pick Fitz's brain and Nate's brain about a variety of different topics, anything. And someone brought up the idea of different groups of the receiver positions, returning players, transfers, and freshmen. And Nate, you say that Penn State has to get contributions from those freshmen. What's the mix that you think is most optimal for Penn State to have a successful passing game that develops this coming season? Because I have some thoughts on it, but I want to get your perspective on where you think the priorities lie from the development side with Andy Kotelnicki and Marcus Hagans.
I need you to ask the question again. Like, from what
is the optimal? What is the optimal mix of transfers, returning players, and freshmen? So, like, can they have 3 freshmen contributing next year and be successful? Because there is a full reboot in the room right now, basically, and everyone wants the shiny new toy, which is typically the underclassmen. But in this situation, I'm just curious of what you think the best mix of players is for Penn State. Transfer heavy, returning starters, Liam Clifford being a part of the conversation. What is the best mix you think of players contributing to create that step forward in the passing game?
Yeah, I think that have I thought deeply enough about this to feel like this is a fully formed answer? No. But I think that the transfers have to be hits, right? I don't think they can miss on either one of those guys. I think they have to contribute. Preferably, obviously, to Penn State, one of them should be a star. Right? I mean, it's hard to argue otherwise when you don't have any returning production at the position, and Tyler Warren, the most established receiving threat that you have, is gone. So certainly the tight ends still have more pieces coming down the pipe, and those guys will contribute. But for the receiver position to be what Penn State wants it to be, what Penn State needs it to be, I think Caden Saunders would be a real, I don't know about necessity, but given his trajectory and where he's been previously in his career and what the expectation and anticipation was for him this past season before he got hurt, his contribution would be a very important thing. And then, Tysier Denmark, Peter Gonzalez, those guys were shaping up before the start of the season. They were grabbing attention, right? Buzzing a little bit in July and August. And so if those guys can be difference makers and make plays that otherwise hadn't been made with consistency, it's just it's a uphill climb. There's a lot to be done there in terms of establishing that room and that position, that is going to require players stepping to the forefront that have not done so thus far, but also, like, necessary caveat, haven't done so because they've been hurt, because they haven't been in action. They haven't been part of the conversation.
Fitz, do you have any additional thoughts on that? Or do you want me to ask you one of the questions from the thread today?
I just think about the conversation that we have with wide receiver size, and you ask what's the best size for a wide receiver, or size combination for the wide receiver. The best size is a good wide receiver. Like, doesn't matter what size they are, fit them in there. So it doesn't matter if he's a transfer, if he's coming back, if he's a freshman, redshirt freshman, whatever. Like, just find the best ones and go with it. Now, there are layers to it in terms of bringing in transfers that you expect those guys to play. You have an expectation that those guys are going to probably bring a little bit more to the table than, your guys that haven't gotten it done to date. But at the same time, like, find the best guys and go with it until we see the spring feedback. Like, I don't think there's a general answer for this.
Yeah, I just, the idea that you can be led by freshmen it's a rare place. And I guess just from that perspective, if you have the idea that you have to get something out of both the freshmen or all three of the freshmen, John Brown, like, it just feels like it's a conversation where you're straying into dangerous territory. I always say, if you're counting your ifs, you're in trouble. If Peter Gonzalez is able to play in the spring and gets better, if Tysier Denmark starts making plays, if you get something out of it, like it just feels like there's a lot in the air right now. And some of the things that feel concrete are they brought in those transfers for a reason, and seeing their skill sets, they fit very specific roles. And if you're not starting there, it feels like there is a problem to the process, which could be wrong. Like I could be wrong about that.
I mean, you got to know if they're good enough. Like that's the thing. Like you're taking a chance in the transfer portal at any position, really, to bring in somebody that either wasn't working out at his last school or just needed a fresh start. And you need to find out if it's going to work. And it's going to come down to scheme. It's going to come down to that sort of athleticism and talent. And this is a room that has to restructure. Like there's no way getting around it. It has to be something different than we've seen the last 2 years.
Yeah, this receiver question is brought to you by redundancy. Redundancy this offseason. The one thing we're going to come back to is the Penn State receiver position. So next question here. This is from Nittany on the Blue White Illustrated message board. He says, Penn State just hired Andrew Jackson and Greg Gattuso. They already have Torrance Brown and Deion Barnes as defensive line coaches and assistants. What do adding these new guys do for the program, Fitz? I don't think you need to get into specifics of what their job is going to be, but generally adding veteran guys to a position where you've got young coaches. What is the dynamic of adding all of these assistants on now these limitless coaching staffs, and how much of a benefit, or where is the benefit in your mind?
Almost limitless coaching staffs. But this is sort of the new college football staffing sort of like halo here, where your new assistant defensive line coach was the primary defensive line coach at a Power 4 program. Like that's pretty crazy to think about, when you're talking about 10 assistants, now all of a sudden you're talking about 25 assistants. It's very, very much a different avenue than we're used to seeing. Andrew Jackson has been here. He knows the lay of the land. He knows that, he knows what it's like to work for James Franklin. He was just here for a year, but still, you kind of know what it's like. And then you get different perspectives. Greg Gattuso, who was a fantastic defensive line coach for Pitt and then went to Albany for several years as a head coach, is going to give you sort of that old wise man type theory over top. But at the same time, Frank Leonard's been pretty awesome in that role in the offensive line. So you're developing different voices. You're developing different levels of experience and levels of perspective, really. So Gattuso, if he's going to be Yoda, that's great. That's what you want to see. But you also got a guy that, is very young, like Andrew Jackson, to work with Deion Barnes. Torrance Brown still trying to figure out what his role is going to be if he's sticking around. I think he's been here for 3 years, so his GA ship could be coming to an end here. I have to double check the dates on that because everything post-COVID is the same year to me. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, because it was just basically Barnes and Brown last year, and they did a heck of a job. Absolutely did a heck of a job. Torrance has a wonderful future in this business. But now you've got 3, maybe 4 guys that are running that defensive line room, all with, I think, pretty distinctive different roles. And Deion's still going to be at the top of that. But at the same time, Andrew Jackson was Power 4 defensive line coach. To have him as an analyst, I think it's invaluable.
Yeah, just the concentration of talent doesn't have to just be on the player side, although that is one of the biggest levers you can pull. Getting the most out of them is also very important. This last one here from
and going back to this, you've got a lot of different defensive linemen in that room. So think back to when Larry Johnson was the defensive line coach and he was the guy. If you're a player, you're going to have to be one of Larry's guys. Now, if you're a player and maybe you don't mesh with Deion like you thought you would, now you got Andrew Jackson. Now you got Torrance Brown. Now you got maybe Greg Gattuso. So like you see this, especially in the offensive line, when there's that many guys, and this isn't a, there's no evidence for some guy doesn't like Deion, whatever. This is a perspective type thing. You've got that many guys that you can find your coach. You can find a guy that you can confide in. You can find a guy that can make you happier being at Penn State. And when you're happier at Penn State, you're going to play better. So I think that comes into it as well. You're getting different mindsets from different guys. So I just wanted to throw that one in there, especially because we're talking about Frank Leonard and the offensive line and, the number of guys that they have there.